had like a last-ditch emergency plan just to meet on the railway station and see where it can take us. So we were not organized thieves.
After fleeing so quickly, many are considering what to do next. Do next at the border town of one man still across the east of inside Poland. Some Romanians met them to offer their help.
Moscow faced down the world on Friday by vetoing a United Nations Security Council resolution deploring the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The veto was a certainty, but China decided to abstain along with India and the United Arab Emirates, a move viewed as a rejection of Putin's diplomacy.
That this is a war of choice. Russia's choice. Russia chose to invade its neighbor.
And the UN chief rejected in very clear terms Russia's aggression towards Ukraine.
The United Nations was born out of war. Today, that objective was not achieved. Because we must never give up. We must give peace another chance. Soldiers need to return to their barracks. Leaders need to return to the path of dialogue and peace.
In a gesture of outright rejection of Russia's actions, most Security Council members held up a Ukrainian flag against the backdrop of a tapestry of Picasso's Guernica, considered one of the most powerful anti-war paintings in history.
Has been responding to the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine. We spoke to Frans Timmermans, the Executive Vice President of the European Commission.
Europe in the last 30 years has never been able to come up with a coherent and comprehensive strategy towards Russia, and the Russians have been playing around with that, making friends here and cherishing enemies there, just because they cannot dominate us. They're too weak for that. They try and disrupt us. That's what they've been doing for years. And as long as we accept that disruption, as long as European prime ministers go to Moscow in the middle of a crisis to just make a gas deal for themselves, as long as that happens, the Russians will be laughing. They will be trying to play off one European against the other.
And do you think Europe, the EU member states are mindful of what you're saying there? What could they have done better in the last few years?
Но война – это война. Да, я тоже смотрела. А эти тоже. Что ты
Є ласкавої розрадниці, крім тебе.
Uma Ave Maria, em ucraniano e depois em português.
Спаси, Збавителя душ наших, agora e na hora de nossa morte. Amém.
країни перед голодом, ари та помилував нас. Тобі славу віддаємо, Отцю і
This week on Euronews.
The ocean faces many problems for which we as a society are responsible, whether we realize it or not. Enthusiasts in Europe and around the world are finding new ways to bolster public awareness and create unique career opportunities for young people willing to help. As we'll see on Ocean this week on Euronews and Euronews.com.
How can your bold vision be transformed into a sustainable reality? Is your strategy ambitious enough to drive transformation at scale? Are you reframing your future, or is the future reframing you? Realize your transformation with connected strategy, transactions, and technology.
Get all the international news you want with the Euronews app.
third day in a row, Russian artillery and cruise missiles have been hitting not only Kiev, but other Ukrainian cities. This missile hit a residential building in a western suburb of Kiev early on Saturday morning. 3 floors of the building were severely damaged. It's not yet known whether there were casualties. Firefighters did manage to carry some of the residents out. According to the city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, at least 35 people were injured on Friday night, including 2 children. The health ministry says at least 198 people have died since the invasion on Thursday. Russian soldiers are continuing to advance closer to the centre, although it's not clear exactly how close they are. Ukrainian officials claim they're having some success in stopping the assault. Meanwhile, President Putin has been urging Ukraine's military to overthrow its own government.
Well, the sun is unusually bright this morning over the Ukrainian capital, but the mood is sterner than ever. The news that more explosions and more fighting had occurred last night just increased the anxiety and the anger of the population. I'll just take you on a quick, short tour of a neighborhood I'm staying in, right in the city center, to show you the atmosphere here. I mean, the streets are really deserted, aside from a few passers-by and also journalists and just people curious to see what the journalists are doing around here. So that was one street. The cafes, the bars, the restaurants and the shops are all closed except for a few ones which closed very early. Behind me you see another deserted street. So really the atmosphere here is gloomy, and people that I've met all day and yesterday night are really panicked. They're also angry. I met a lot of people who had taken shelter to spend the night in the underground last night for the second time. That's the only place where they felt safe, and they were there because the word was spreading that the Russian troops could be inside the city at any time. So many of them were also telling me that they would try to catch a train to another safer part of the country, and places from where they could reach Poland. A lot of people are still trying to flee to Poland at the moment. On the other hand, they were also telling me that they would do anything they could in their own way. Here's another deserted street, and that's basically what you see in Kyiv. So yes, they were saying that they were supportive and very admirative of their military, of their troops, and they also praised the way the government and their president actually handled the situation. And in fact, Ukrainian President Zelensky issued a video last night on social media which went absolutely viral. He wanted to reassure the public that he had not escaped the country, he had not disappeared, to debunk allegations made by Russian sources. And so he stood in front of the presidential building with his top advisors saying, telling people that they were all here and supportive of the population. And this, for the Ukrainian population, is also a sign of support, of unity. And everyone I've met yesterday was insisting on this, saying that, together, and I quote, "Together we are stronger and we will overcome." So this is the message they clearly wanted to convey to the world, and while at the same time, being at a loss for words and telling me about the complete uncertainty in which they lived, and they really called again and again the international community, and in particular Europe, to do more, to take further steps to help Ukraine get out of this nightmare. Valerie Goria in Kyiv from Euronews.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is vowing to fight on, and there are signs that many citizens are backing him and have no plans to surrender. The capital Kyiv is empty of normal everyday life, and the detritus of war litters the streets. But soldiers and others willing to fight are digging in for an expected attack by Russian forces. Others are seeking shelter and protection from the fighting wherever they can find it. Those are basically the two options for Ukrainians who decided to stay in the cities, whether through choice or because they were unable to leave for various reasons. Those looking for protection head downwards, underground, whether it's the subway or the basements of buildings, distress written on their faces. Mainly women, children and elderly people, but often whole families.
As Russian artillery and cruise missile strikes continue, there are few people who are prepared to brave Kiev's streets. Most have obeyed the authorities' call to take shelter. Our correspondent Sasha Vakulina has sent this report from an undisclosed location in the city.
Kyiv residents had a very tough night, which they all spent in shelters after being told to stock on blankets, water and food, since the authorities do not know when people would be allowed out. The situation is too dangerous now in the Ukrainian capital. All night long we could hear the explosions, and then early in the morning we were all woken up by a very, very loud explosion, which we now know that was a missile hitting a residential building in the area that is close to the Zhuliany airport. This is the second biggest airport in Kyiv, in Ukraine's capital. People still stay in shelters. The mood is very, very grim. They're trying to stay safe. They're trying not to leave the basements or the underground metro stations. These are now the safest places to be. Ukrainian authorities and Kyiv authorities are doing their best to give the regular updates to the people, still telling them to stay calm, not to panic, to stay safe, to be in shelter, and to be very, very careful with how they consume information, warning people about the huge amount of some fake information that could be online. Now, with this beautiful day, the sun is shining, the sky is now blue, but I could hear still now the explosions that are happening in the Ukrainian capital. Here, the residents are bracing for what's coming next during the day. Sasha Vakulina, Euronews, Kyiv.
As the night had fallen on the Ukrainian capital, all seemed calm in the deserted city center. But behind the quietness, Kyiv on Tuesday was bracing for the storm. Security was on maximum alert.
Well, all police units in Kyiv are under combat alarm, so here is a group controlling vehicles. Off camera, they tell me they found several automatic rifles in this vehicle. The gun's serial numbers were erased, they're not registered. The men get nervous. It's the third time in one day that this patrol has made such findings. And there had been many more, they said, on Tuesday in Kyiv, where street fighting was expected if Russia invaded the capital that night. Valerie Goria, Euronews.
Thousands of Ukrainians are attempting to leave their homeland to escape the violence of the Russian invasion. From the city of Mostyshka, it's less than 20 kilometers to the border with Poland. But people are spending days and nights in traffic for the chance to leave Ukraine and much of their lives behind.
We are staying here for a long time, maybe 6 or 7 hours already, but it's crazy. It's crazy traffic. I don't know how to leave my native country. Actually, I don't want to leave my native country, but because of the invaders, I must leave it as fast as possible.
Many Ukrainians who do manage to cross the border have no plan other than escape. They have no shelter, no job to go to, no transportation and limited resources, and they consider themselves lucky to have got out. On the Polish side, some volunteers have been organised to help them.
We have already organized a web of people who will be willing to help with housing, with employment, with transportation. And right now we have found housing for about 12 families.
For many families leaving the country, there's the added heartbreak and fear of having to leave husbands, fathers and sons behind. All men aged between 18 and 60 are forbidden from leaving by the Ukrainian government.
In southern Poland, a train arrives from Odessa with exhausted passengers. Refugees have been crossing into the European Union in their tens of thousands. More than 38,000 have now arrived in the country, mostly by road. They'd feared the Russian military would attack Odessa, where Ukraine's main seaport lies.
I had a message from my friends. They woke me up with a phone call informing me that there was the first sign of military actions against Ukraine. And so we had like a last-ditch emergency plan just to meet on the railway station and see where it can take us. We were not organized seriously.
After fleeing so quickly, many are considering what to do next. At the border town of Medyka, one man says he'll head for Wrocław, a big city further inside Poland.
We leave our two dogs with a friend there because we were not in time to make them a passport or a permissions or I don't know what. So we now thinking about what to do next and going to probably Wrocław to take a deep breath there and decide what to do.
Thousands have fled into Romania. Some came on foot, others by car or by ferry. Many have friends or relatives living here. And in a sign of solidarity, some Romanians met them to offer their help.
Moscow faced down the world on Friday by vetoing a United Nations Security Council resolution deploring the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The veto was a certainty, but China decided to abstain along with India and the United Arab Emirates, a move viewed as a rejection of Putin's diplomacy.
Let us never forget that this is a war of choice, Russia's choice. Russia chose to invade its neighbor.
And the UN chief rejected in very clear terms Russia's aggression towards Ukraine.
The United Nations was born out of war to end war. Today, that objective was not achieved. But we must never give up. We must give peace another chance. Soldiers need to return to their barracks. Leaders need to turn to the paths of dialogue and peace.
In a gesture of outright rejection of Russia's actions, most Security Council members held up a Ukrainian flag against the backdrop of a tapestry of Picasso's Guernica, considered one of the most powerful anti-war paintings in history.
To hear how the European Commission has been responding to the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, we spoke to Franz Timmermans, the Executive Vice President of the European Commission.
Europe in the last 30 years has never been able to come up with a coherent and comprehensive strategy towards Russia. And the Russians have been playing around with that, making friends here and cherishing enemies there, just because they cannot dominate us. They're too weak for that. They try and disrupt us. That's what they've been doing for years. And as long as we accept that disruption, as long as European prime ministers go to Moscow in the middle of a crisis to just make a gas deal for themselves, as long as that happens, the Russians will be laughing and will be trying to play off one European against the other.
And do you think Europe, the EU member states, are mindful of what you're saying there? I mean, what could they have done better in the last couple of years?
Well, I think too often we've thought that our values, because they're so self-evident, they would also be self-executing, and they're not, and they're being attacked. And it's a long-term project of Vladimir Putin. He's been doing this for decades. He's been financing, bankrolling the extreme right in Europe. He's been trying to influence the press. He's been doing everything to undermine our democracy and our way of life. And I hope that now, when everyone in Europe can see what this leads to, that nobody is naive anymore, that we will stop sort of explaining away his behavior, and we will know that we are being attacked at an ideological level, which is comparable to the Cold War, and that we need to defend ourselves. We're so much stronger.
And the Ukrainian President Zelensky has said his country has been left alone. What's your message to him?
Well, if I were in his position, I would feel exactly the same. And I have to really admire his courage. I breathlessly watched the speech he held in Russian to the Russian population, which I found one of the most impressive speeches I've ever seen.
Frans Timmermans, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us here on Euronews.
My pleasure.